It begins with the sound of machines. A steady beep, a metallic rhythm echoing through a sterile room that smells of antiseptic and fear. Under the blinding glow of surgical lights, a young trauma surgeon named Dr. Michael Anders stands frozen for a moment, gloved hands trembling, eyes fixed on the motionless figure before him. He takes a slow breath as if trying to steady his heart before the storm begins. In 20 years of surgery, his voice comes through the dark, calm but heavy. I thought I'd seen everything. But that night, I witnessed something I still can't explain. The camera moves closer, to the beads of sweat forming under his mask, to the lifeless body of a young woman being wheeled in by paramedics. The gurney slams against the table. Someone shouts, 27-year-old female, massive internal trauma, multiple fractures, unresponsive. Dr. Anders nods, and the team moves with practiced precision. The room becomes a storm of motion. Gloves snap, instruments clang, and the smell of cauterized flesh cuts through the air. The woman's name, they later learn, is Emily Carter. But right now, she's a case number. A life slipping through fingers that have held too many like hers. Broken ribs, collapsed lung, torn aorta. Her blood pressure is barely traceable. The surgeon's voice is steady, though his pulse is racing. He barks out orders, calling for suction, transfusion, clamps. Around him, the nurses move like a synchronized current, each one locked into the rhythm of saving a stranger. Outside the operating room, the world is silent. But inside, time stretches and folds. Dr. Anders can feel the weight of every second. We work in a place between hope and surrender, he says softly. You learn not to think about it too much. You just fight. For nearly an hour, they do just that. A battle against the inevitable. Emily's body is pale, fragile, barely responding. They push adrenaline, shock her heart, start compressions again. Nothing. The monitor's beeping slows, then flattens into one long, unbroken tone. The sound every surgeon dreads, the sound that means the fight is over. Time of death. 2:47 a.m., the nurse announces quietly. Dr. Anders steps back. The gloves peel off his hands with a snap that sounds final. He stares at her for a moment, trying to process the line he's just crossed. In the OR, death doesn't wait for grief. There's paperwork, cleanup, another patient waiting somewhere else. He whispers under his breath, I'm sorry. He turns to leave. The sound of monitors fades behind him. But then, from the corner of the room, a nurse's voice slices through the silence. Sharp, panicked. Doctor, she's moving. Dr. Anders stops. He thinks he's misheard. Then the nurse screams again, louder this time. Her hand! She moved her hand! The surgeon rushes back, eyes darting to the monitor. The flat line is gone. A weak pulse flickers across the screen. Emily's chest rises, barely but unmistakably. For a moment, no one speaks. The room, once a whirlwind, stands utterly still. Her heart is beating again. Not from the defibrillator, not from medication. It's beating on its own. Dr. Anders can't find words. He can only stare, hands trembling once more. Not from exhaustion, but from awe. She was gone, he whispers. And then, she wasn't. The camera lingers on Emily's still face. Her body lies motionless under the lights, but the monitor's steady rhythm has returned. A soft, impossible proof of life. And in that room, among the hum of machines and the stunned silence of trained professionals, one impossible truth settles over them all. Something had just happened that medicine could not explain. Before she was a mystery on an operating table, Emily Carter was a daughter, a fiancée, a teacher, a woman whose life was stitched together by kindness and quiet joy. The story shifts from the sterile hum of the hospital to the warmth of a small apartment filled with color. Canvases stacked by the window, paintbrushes resting in jars, laughter echoing faintly from a memory that feels almost alive. Her mother's voice breaks the stillness. She was always creating, she says softly. Even as a child, Emily saw beauty in everything, in shadows, in broken things. Photographs flicker across the screen, Emily with streaks of paint on her hands, kneeling beside a child at an art therapy class, smiling as if the world itself were a canvas she could heal. Dr. Anders' voice fades in, reflective. When I first met her, I didn't know her name. She was just another trauma case. But afterward, I needed to know who she was, because what happened that night, it didn't feel random. The camera cuts to a snow-covered highway. Tire tracks curve wildly toward the guardrail. It was late January, the roads glazed with ice. Emily had been driving home from a late art therapy session at the Children's Hospital, a program she volunteered for every week. Witnesses said her car hit a patch of black ice, spun 3 times, and slammed into an oncoming vehicle. Paramedics arrived to find her crushed between the seat and steering column, her pulse faint and her breath shallow. One of them recalls, "We didn't think she'd make it. She'd lost so much blood." But there was something in her eyes, even half-conscious. She looked like she was still fighting. We see the ambulance lights flashing against the snow, a paramedic's hand squeezing her wrist, murmuring, "Stay with me. Emily, just stay with me." That was at 2:03 a.m. 24 minutes later, She was in Dr. Anders's OR, her body torn apart, her chances almost non-existent. Back in the present, Emily's father speaks for the first time. His voice trembles as he holds one of her unfinished paintings. She had this gift. She helped kids paint their nightmares into something beautiful. The night of the crash, she was supposed to bring home a canvas one of the kids made. It was called The Light That Never Goes Out. There's a pause. A long one. The narrator returns. Sometimes, when we lose a patient, we try not to know who they were. It's easier that way. But with Emily, I couldn't let it go. She wasn't just another statistic. There was something about her. A light, maybe, that refused to go out. The tone softens, the sound of a heartbeat faint beneath the narration. A fragile rhythm, steady and human. The section closes on Dr. Anders's reflection. When she arrived in my OR, I didn't know her name. By the time she left, I'd never forget her face. The night unfolds again. The bright lights, the blur of motion, the symphony of urgency that defines the trauma room. Dr. Michael Anders' voice carries over the scene, calm but grave. People imagine surgery as clean, orderly, but trauma surgery? It's chaos under control. You're holding someone's life together with your hands while everything around you falls apart. Emily Carter lies motionless on the table. The damage is worse than they feared. Broken ribs, collapsed lung, the aorta torn. Her abdomen is filled with blood, pressure plummeting with every heartbeat that fades weaker than the last. The air is thick with tension and sterile heat. Scalpel. Suction. Clamp. The words are short, efficient, the language of survival. The monitors flash in quick succession, painting the room in red and green pulses. Dr. Anders works with surgical precision, hands steady even as fatigue burns through his shoulders. He moves fast, repairing, suturing, patching, but every victory feels like a temporary truce in a war they're losing. A nurse calls out, "BP dropping again." Another adjusts the IV, pushing more fluids, more hope. The anesthesiologist mutters, "She's crashing." They shock her heart once, twice, nothing. They switch to manual compressions. The room is filled with the dull rhythm of hands pressing against a chest that refuses to respond. Dr. Anders describes it later. There's a moment when you feel the line between doing everything and knowing it's no longer enough. You hate that moment, because giving up feels like betrayal, but keeping on feels like denial. For 53 minutes, the team fights. Emily's body is pale, blood pooling faster than they can replace it. The room smells of iron and adrenaline. The sounds, the rhythmic suction, the dull thud of compressions, blur into white noise. Finally, Dr. Anders gives a slow nod. "Call it." Time of death, 2:47 a.m., the monitor flatlines. That single, piercing tone cuts through every other sound. The team freezes for a breath, then begins the quiet ritual of ending. Tools down, drapes removed, instruments counted, silence falling like dust. Dr. Anders steps back from the table, exhaustion carving shadows under his eyes. He stares at Emily, still and colorless, a young woman whose story ended far too soon. He pulls off his gloves, the snap echoing in the emptying room. His voice trembles. "I'm sorry," he whispers, as if the words could bridge the gap between the living and the gone. He turns away, stripping off his gown, ready to leave the operating room. The world narrows to the shuffle of his steps, the hollow click of instruments being cleaned. Then a voice, sharp, disbelieving. "Doctor, her heart's..." "It's..." Dr. Anders spins back. The nurse's eyes are wide. The monitor that had gone silent now flickers with faint, erratic blips. A beat, then another. The impossible rhythm of life returning. "Check the leads," he orders, almost reflexively. They do. Everything's connected. The readings are real. Emily's chest moves, a shallow, involuntary breath, but unmistakable. She's got a pulse," a nurse stammers. The room goes still. No one speaks. Every person there, trained professionals hardened by years of death and loss, stares in silent disbelief. Her heart is beating. No shock, no drugs. No compressions, just beating. Dr. Anders' voice softens, haunted. "In all my years, I'd never seen it. The heart, once stopped that long, doesn't just start again. But hers did, on its own." He approaches the table slowly, eyes locked on the monitor. The sound, that once flatlined, now echoes through the room like a pulse from another world. And there, under the sterile lights of the OR, science falters. Logic hesitates. And something else, something unnameable, takes its place. "I'd seen patients die," he says quietly. "I'd seen them come close. But I'd never seen someone return from nothing." Emily Carter was alive, but not awake. Her body had crossed the boundary of death and somehow returned, yet her mind remained distant, unreachable. The ICU was quiet except for the mechanical hiss of the ventilator, each exhale sounding like a ghost of her own breath. Machines surrounded her, keeping time in rhythmic beeps and sighs. Her skin was pale, her eyelids still, her fingers motionless beneath a thin hospital blanket. Dr. Anders stood beside her bed, staring at the monitor. The numbers were stable, impossibly stable, for someone who had been declared dead minutes earlier. He whispered to the ICU team, "We don't know what to expect. We'll keep her on full support, monitor everything." But beneath his composed tone was something unspoken, a quiet, gnawing disbelief. Days passed. Emily remained in a coma. Her scans showed faint brain activity, not enough for consciousness, but not the silence they had feared. "Minimal response," the neurologist said. "We can't predict recovery. It could be hours, or never." Her family never left her side. Her mother, Margaret, sat beside the bed day and night, reading to her, whispering memories. The first day of kindergarten, the time she painted a mural on the garage wall, the laughter that used to fill their home. "If you can hear me, Emmy, come back, please." One night, as the lights dimmed and the nurses changed shifts, something happened. Margaret took Emily's hand and whispered the same words she'd whispered every night. And then, beneath the sheets, Emily's fingers twitched. Just once, but enough for her mother to freeze, eyes wide, heart pounding. She called the nurse, who checked her reflexes. Nothing. It might have been random, they said, reflexive. But Margaret knew what she felt. "She squeezed my hand," she insisted. She knew I was here. Over the next few days, more strange moments followed. A nurse swore she saw Emily's eyes move under her lids when her favorite song played softly from a phone speaker. Another said she heard a faint sigh, a sound that didn't come from the ventilator. Dr. Anders was torn between hope and skepticism. "We tell ourselves not to read into things like this," he narrates quietly. "Muscle twitches, neural misfires, autonomic reflexes. There's always an explanation. But something about Emily didn't feel like coincidence. The ICU became a place between two realities, medicine and mystery, science and soul. Nurses began speaking to her as if she could hear them. Even the most rational among them admitted there was something different about this case." Late one evening, Dr. Anders walked into the dim ICU. He saw Margaret sitting by her daughter's bed, holding her hand, tears streaking down her face. She whispered, "If you can hear me, Emily, come back." And then, from the corner of the room, a nurse gasped. A single tear slid down Emily's cheek. It began with a flicker, a faint movement beneath her closed eyelids, like the tremor of a dream trying to take form. The machines around her hummed as they always had, but this time, something felt different. The ICU nurse on duty leaned in, watching closely. Emily's fingers twitched again, then her lips parted ever so slightly. A sound escaped, fragile, breathless, but it was hers. "Dr. Anders, you should see this." He rushed in, stethoscope still around his neck, disbelief etched across his face. Her eyes fluttered open. They didn't focus at first. The world was a blur of light and shadows, but her gaze was alive. For the first time since that night, Emily Carter was awake. Her mother let out a cry that cracked the silence. "Emmy, can you hear me?" Emily's lips moved, slow and unsteady, forming no sound but carrying meaning. Her eyes filled with tears. Dr. Anders narrates softly, "I've seen people come back from comas before, but not like this. Not after flatline. Not after brain silence." He recalls standing there, watching the monitors light up with stronger readings. Her heart, her oxygen, her brain activity, everything surging at once, as if her body had finally decided to return to life. In the following days, the hospital buzzed with quiet awe. Word spread among the staff. "The flatline girl is awake." Some stopped by her room just to see her breathing, blinking, existing. But while her body healed, her mind seemed elsewhere, wandering through memories that didn't belong to this world. During her first moments of lucidity, Emily whispered to Dr. Anders, "I was somewhere." It wasn't dark, but it wasn't here either. Her voice was fragile, each word an effort, but her conviction was clear. "I could see you. All of you." Dr. Anders froze. He'd heard stories, patients describing sensations during near-death experiences, but never anything like this. "What do you mean, Emily?" he asked gently. She looked at him, her eyes glistening. "I heard you say time of death. I saw you take off your gloves, and then..." She paused, swallowing hard. There was music. Someone was humming. The nurse standing nearby gasped. She had been humming, softly, unconsciously, to keep her hands from shaking after they'd called time. "She hadn't told anyone," Emily continued. "It felt like I was floating above all of you. I wasn't scared. It was calm, warm. I didn't want to leave, but something told me I had to." Her words hung in the air, heavy and beautiful. For a moment, even Dr. Anders couldn't speak. He had studied medicine his whole life, yet here was something that refused to fit into any textbook. As Emily regained her strength, she began to paint again, not with the precision of her old work, but with colors and forms that seemed almost otherworldly. One painting showed a vast, glowing horizon, a space between light and shadow where human forms hovered like whispers of memory. She called it the place between, and Dr. Anders visited her often, sometimes sitting in silence, sometimes asking quiet questions he wasn't sure he wanted answered. Did it feel real? He asked one day. Emily smiled faintly. It was more real than this. Her doctors documented everything. Neurologists analyzed her brain scans, looking for anomalies. There were none. By every measurable standard, she should have been brain dead when she described those memories, and yet she remembered every detail. Dr. Anders' voice closes the section in quiet awe. We save lives every day, but sometimes something else intervenes. Something we can't name, can't measure, can't deny. Emily Carter came back to life, but not as the same person who left. Months passed, and the hospital slowly returned to its normal rhythm. But for Dr. Michael Anders, nothing felt normal anymore. Every time he walked past the ICU, he remembered that flat line, that impossible return to life. He told himself it was a fluke, an anomaly of biology. But late at night, when the hospital grew quiet, doubt crept in like a shadow. Emily Carter had not only survived, she had healed in ways no one predicted. Her lungs had fully recovered, her neurological scans were normal, and her cognition sharper than expected. She even began walking again, unsteady at first, but determined. Yet behind her smile, there lingered a calmness that was almost unsettling, as if she carried a secret too vast for words. Dr. Anders narrates softly, I needed answers, not because I doubted her, but because I doubted everything I thought I knew. He began reaching out to colleagues, neurologists, psychologists, even researchers studying near-death phenomena. Each one offered possibilities, theories that sounded scientific but felt incomplete. One neurologist suggested it was a post-anoxic hallucination, the brain's desperate attempt to interpret dying neural signals. Another claimed it was temporal lobe stimulation, a flood of electrical misfires creating the illusion of an afterlife. But the more Dr. Anders listened, the less satisfied he felt. None of them could explain how she heard us, how she saw us, how she described things that happened when her brain showed no measurable activity. Emily, too, was searching. In interviews with her therapists, she described vivid sensations, warmth, light, and a voice that told her it wasn't her time. She didn't claim it was heaven. She didn't even call it divine. She called it truth. When she met with Dr. Anders for a follow-up appointment, he asked her what she thought had really happened. Emily looked at him for a long moment, her eyes gentle but certain. You think it was biology? Maybe it was. But maybe biology is just a doorway. Those words lingered with him. Biology as a doorway, not an end but a passage. He couldn't stop thinking about it. The documentary shifts tone here. Quieter, reflective. Dr. Anders walks through the hospital corridors, his steps echoing in the emptiness. He passes the OR where it all happened. The same room, the same sterile lights. He pauses at the doorway, eyes distant. As surgeons, we like to believe we control the outcome. We hold the scalpel, the sutures, the science. But maybe we're only part of the story. Emily's recovery becomes symbolic, a living question that medicine cannot yet answer. She begins to paint again, her new work infused with strange, luminous shapes. She tells Dr. Anders, I used to paint what I saw. Now, I paint what I felt. Her art begins attracting attention, not for its beauty, but for its haunting familiarity. Several nurses recognize colors and patterns that mirror the sterile lights and shadows of the OR itself. Dr. Anders sums it up quietly. I believe in science. I always will. But sometimes science shows us the limits of what we can explain, not the limits of what's real. Years have passed. The chaos of that night has long since faded into memory. But for Dr. Michael Anders, the echoes remain. He stands in an empty operating room, the same one where Emily Carter died and lived again. The lights above him hum softly, casting sterile reflections on polished steel. His hands, older now, rest on the edge of the surgical table. He speaks in a low voice, more to himself than anyone else. Every surgeon carries ghosts. But Emily? She's the one who came back. The documentary shifts between present and past. Flashes of that night, the flatline monitor, the frantic hands, the impossible heartbeat. Over it all, his voice continues. We like to think we know where life ends. That medicine can define the moment when a person is gone. But that night, that line moved. Emily's story became a quiet legend within the hospital, spoken of in hushed tones by nurses on late shifts, referenced by interns who didn't quite believe it happened. Dr. Anders never sought attention for it. He never wrote about it in journals or spoke at conferences. Because how do you publish something you don't understand? He says softly. You can't reduce it to data when part of it feels like faith. Emily lives a quieter life now, painting full-time from a small studio near the coast. Her work has changed, softer, more ethereal. One canvas shows a vast field of color, light blending into light without horizon or shadow. She titled it Homecoming. When asked in an interview what inspired her, she simply said, I paint what I saw when I was gone. Dr. Anders visits her one last time. The camera lingers on their reunion. Two people bound by a night that defied reason. They sit by the window, light filtering through the glass like water. She smiles at him, serene, unburdened. He asks her if she ever wonders why she came back. She pauses. I used to, she says softly, but I think I was given a choice. To stay there, or to finish something here. Maybe that's why we all come back, because we're not done yet. He nods, though the answer doesn't ease his confusion. It only deepens it. When he leaves her studio, the camera follows his reflection in the glass. One man standing between two worlds, the world he can measure and the one he cannot. His closing narration carries over the final images, Emily painting, her brush moving slowly through color and light. We define death by silence, no pulse, no brainwaves, no breath. But maybe death isn't silence at all. Maybe it's a moment of listening to something we're not meant to understand. The music swells, gentle and sorrowful. The last image lingers on one of Emily's paintings, a glowing horizon, colors shifting like living light. Across the screen, her words appear in white. I don't know what to call it, but I know I was loved. Fade to black.